Elohim is the plural of God. It's gods. And people might say, where? Where did we start seeing the Trinity in the Old Testament? I see it in the first verse of the first chapter of the first book of the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, let's take that back into the Hebrew. It says, Elohim created. Elohim is the plural of God. It's gods. In the beginning, gods, but then the word created treats that word as if it's singular. In the beginning, gods created, as if it were singular. So right there at the very beginning of the Old Testament, you have plurality and singularity in the Godhead.
Talk to us about that a little bit.
Okay, there are certain Hebrew words, and these words have plural endings, but they don't necessarily have plural meanings. And to use an English example, we can talk about the word news. Mm-hmm. News is a singular as well as could be a plural, but just because it has an S ending doesn't mean that we automatically assume that. So it is in Hebrew, the word for face, panim, also has a plural ending, but it is a singular word. Same thing with heaven and water, mayim and hashemayim, or shemayim. So the idea of it having a plural ending doesn't necessitate a plural meaning. And besides, if Elohim did mean God in a plural sense, the plural of God is not a tripersonal God, but gods.
Yes, yeah.
And that's polytheism.
Yes.
Right? So
Okay.
That's not very helpful for any of us to say that God is a plural. But also in Hebrew, as in many languages, probably most languages, the verb also contains a number in it. So singular or plural. Mm-hmm. And so we have good indications grammatically that Elohim is thought of as a singular when it's applied to Yahweh, the God of the Creator God, mm-hmm. And so that's because the verb is actually singular. So it says in the beginning here of the Bible, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The word "created" there could either be a singular or plural, and it's singular, even though the word Elohim is technically a plural form. But here it has a singular meaning, and that's why every single Bible translation under the sun says God instead of gods for Elohim.
Yes, I see.
And so this is not something that we discovered on our own. This is something that's readily accessible if you check mainstream commentaries, or, for example, I looked it up in the Wycliffe Dictionary of Theology, and they say it's the plural of plenitude, and that's the idea that God is so magnificent, so majestic, so powerful, that you give him a plural form for the word God, but it has a singular meaning. Mm-hmm. For example, I looked it up in the Wycliffe Dictionary of Theology, and they say it's the plural of plenitude, and that's the idea that God is so magnificent, so majestic, so powerful, that you give him a plural form for the word God, but it has a singular meaning.
So we're talking about an amazing, wonderful individual who is God, right, but not individuals who are God. There's nothing in the word Elohim that would bring us to the conclusion that somehow God is multiple persons.
Right. I think with Elohim we have two options, and these are the two options the translators use. Either translate it God or gods. And frequently when pagan gods, for example, are in view, Elohim will be translated gods. Mm-hmm. But when it's Yahweh who's being spoken of, it's always translated God in every translation done by anybody that I've ever seen.
And used with the singular verbs and singular pronouns.
Used with singular verbs. And we can also look at a parallel by looking at Dagon or Chemosh or Milcom. or Asherah or Baal. We look at these other pagan gods, and they're all called Elohim too. As individuals. And so it was just a common word for God in their time, and it communicated this sense of majesty and power.
Wow, I like that. One thing I've noticed too about this idea of Elohim meaning somehow persons, this odd notion, no one in the Bible ever makes that point. No one ever says, oh, by the way, Elohim is a reference to multiple. Jesus never says such a thing. None of the apostles, none of the prophets. No one ever says that. So it seems like it's a post-biblical thing developed to support a post-biblical multiple-person God idea.